I'm from Denmark, and I was born in 1950, and I'm from a completely non-religious upbringing. Strictly working class. My father was a lorry driver and a taxi driver. My mother was a hairdresser. So when I started my spiritual path, I was completely on my own. And it really started when my little sister, she died when I was 10 years, and she was 6. She died from a brain tumor. And just a few months before all that happened, I, like innocent children do sometimes, I wished that she wasn't there, because how it is. And suddenly I discovered this was my first meeting with how thoughts are. You should be very careful what you're thinking and what you wish for. A beginning of a complete new experience being here in life. I guess that everybody who is working with spirituality have experienced something like it, that when you come into the earth plane, you really feel estranged. What are we doing here? And it takes, I think, for a lot of people who are sensitive in a special way, and most people are when they are starting, or are spiritual people when they are open for that very early. So they experience this, what the hell are we doing here? And it takes maybe a whole half of a lifetime really to adjust. For me, it took 48 years before I really incarnated and really felt that now I know what I'm doing here, and now I really want to be here also. But it took 35 years in the music business and so forth. But when I was a child, I developed some, what you would today call psychic abilities. I could see straight to people. And the really scary thing about it for me, being only 10, 11, 12 years old, was that I saw and felt that the grown-ups, they had some feelings, they said something else and did something completely different from that. And that was really scary. And I really couldn't cope with that. I couldn't find out why things was not in alignment. And of course, everybody knows that things are not in alignment, and that's what we are really working in order to get things in alignment. But I won't. 35 years in showbiz, and I really never knew what I was doing there. But I had I made some money there, and I had some identity. But all the while I was in the music business, I studied. I didn't go to school because at that time, after my sister died, I started developing some strange, you could call, kundalini movements. Of course, I didn't know anything about it at that time. That came much later. But it meant that I was a very sensitive child in more ways than others. I could also feel other people's pains and their worries and stuff like that. So that was really, really heavy on a child at that age. And when I was 15 years old, I was really miserable. I was about to leave school because I never attended. So what are you supposed to do? But one day I got an envelope with my name on, but there was no sender. But inside there was a small book from a Sufi master called Hazrat Inayat Khan, with aphorisms and sayings. Maybe you have heard about this chap. He was here in England in the 30s and the 40s or 20s. But that book saved my life. And I remember one of the first sayings that when I opened the book was something like that: if you will come forward to greet us, we will bow down and lift you up. And from that moment on, I knew that I was not alone, and there were other people somewhere that was. I had a family. That was how I felt it. So I never had any musical ambition, but I was a musical child. So when the youth movement came, you know, with the beat music and stuff, I just find my way into to life through that, got identity and made some money and stuff. And I just stuck there for 35 years, but all the while studying all the world's tradition. And you just, I mean, if just pick one book if you can, and I'll give you 100 quid if you, and I have read it. I mean, I have been all over the place. So later on, you should also know, when I was very young, I started writing. I started writing all those things that I experienced after my little sister died. You could call them journals or protocols. But when I went into the music business, I forgot all about it. And when I was 40 years old, I had a big party and I decided to leave the music business. Not, you know, just stop touring and to move out on a small island in Denmark. And just before the party, my father and my mother came and they gave me a big envelope. And my father said, you better open it before you go into the party, because I think this is something that you'll find interesting. And when I opened it, immediately I recognized my own handwriting, 12 years old. It was the protocols from them, and it was the most precious gift I ever got. Just imagine a 12-year-old boy through time who's giving this to a 40-year-old man. And I just started thinking, if you can just forget about all this, how much more is there? So when I moved to this island, I really started something that I would suggest, I often tell other people to do with this, come and seek my help, is try and find out your own mythology, because everybody's story makes a difference in the whole big, whatever, collective story. So I really went into all that, and that became some of my first books and so on. And it was really, I really had a great time there, developing myself and so on. But suddenly one day I fell ill, and I was lying in bed for 3 years without having any diagnosis, or couldn't get any help. And it was like, you just imagine a pole, an iron pole coming in here and out in the heart here, completely crucified in one way. And it was so painful. I have no word for it, really. But it just meant that I was lying there for 3 years. And I mean, it's peculiar how you just adjust to things. And you should just imagine every day was like trying to get out of that mud hole and get a grip up there. There was some light. But every day when I tried, I just fell back and had to wait until the next day or the day after until I had so much strength that I could start all over again. But I never got up. Every day I just argued with God. Please, God, what have I done? Why am I lying here? Please help me. And if you take me out of this situation, I'll be the best boy you have ever. No ladies, no smoke, no nothing. I'll be a choir boy. But nothing happened. There was no answer or anything. So after 3 years, just imagine 3 years, one day suddenly there was a difference. It was not due to me. It was something from above or whatever. It was some grace, another thought coming in. Instead of pitying myself, the voice said, if you are lying there feeling have so much pain, you know, pain is relative. You can't really measure pain. Either you hurt or you don't. So this voice said, if you're lying here and are feeling so, it's so heavy to it, why don't you take upon you the pain of the world? That might sound a little bit megalomaniac kind of thing. But guess what? It made the difference. It was like I was neutralized in that moment. I could just stand there and look at myself lying there, and there was no pain. And I think that that was some kind of help. Maybe the board upstairs, they just thought, he had been lying there too, that's enough. or should we turn him over, or should he have another year or whatever. But the week after, I was contacted of one of my colleagues. At that time, I was also supposed to be a member of a board of songwriters in Denmark, but I never attended because I was not able to. Then one of them phoned me and said, Lars, why are you not coming to those meetings? So I just had to tell her my situation, and she said, why haven't you told that long before? I know a man that can help you. And that was really the beginning of the journey that started the o-manuscript. I got a telephone number. I phoned this man. This was between 8 and 9 in the morning. And the second time I tried, I got in contact with him, and within 5 minutes over the telephone, he healed me. It was like I felt somebody knocking me in the neck, and a few minutes later I was fast asleep, very deep sleep. 2 hours later I woke up. A black and white world has suddenly turned into color. I could hear the birds singing on the other side of the island. So I even stopped smoking and whatever. And he said, after 5 minutes, he said, I'll fix it, and you can see me in half a year, and until then, you'll be all right. So half a year later, I went to Copenhagen to meet this man, and found that his place was empty. And when I was on my way down the stairs, somebody came, a messenger, a girl came with a telegram, looked at me, Lars Muhl, yes, there's a telegram to you. Dear Lars, I'm so sorry that I couldn't keep our appointment, but in the meantime I moved down to southern Spain, but I'd like to see you in the Pyrenees, in the holy town of Montségur at that date, and so forth. That was a month later. Now, of course, a month later I was on my way to meet this man, and the day after I met him just in the meadow in front of the holy mountain of Montségur. And the first time we came down from that mountain, I heard myself say, this will result in 3 books. I can feel this will result in 3 books that I have to write about this. And just imagine, at that point, I had just met the man. But that was just something that, it was obvious. I will be in 2 of them, and in the 3rd one, you will meet a special lady. And so it went. You have to read the book if you don't already have read it, because it's all there. And there's also so much in that book that I really can't account for. I can still, to that day, you should just remember, this is 15 years ago. This book came out in 10 years ago in Denmark. So for me, it's been a long path afterwards. But it took me 7 years to finish the whole trilogy, and while I was writing it, I was the favorite of the god. I could walk on water. There was so much energy, and I got so much help. People, they came to me for healing, and I won't tire you with it, but there was some amazing stories there. And of course, I knew that I got some help, but I didn't foresee that when I was finished the last chapter of the 3rd book, it was like somebody just turned off the switch or whatever, and it was so frustrating, because just imagine 7 years where you've been really, I was walking above ground, like it just. So a good friend of mine said to me, yeah, but Lars, you must remember, it's not you who have wrote those books. And of course I knew she was right. Maybe it's time for you now to read the books and to learn, So only a very, very good friend can say things like that. But from then on, while all this was happening, I was a kind of apprentice. with this man, the seer. And he had this amazing ability that he could look straight to people and diagnose them. And people phoned him from all over the world every morning, and he just gave them a diagnosis and told them what to do, or he made some distant healing on them or whatever. And if he couldn't succeed, he was so crushed that he was out of it for days. And then maybe he had a drink or two too much, and then he had to close the whole thing down for a week or 2 weeks. But sometimes that happened a few times, you know, when people, I remember there was a lady, she complained that she had some back problem, and he said, yeah, okay, let me see into it. And it took just 1 minute, he just was sitting with the telephone meditating. Afterwards he just, yes, I'm sorry to tell you, don't panic now, but you have a cancer. Oh, I have a cancer. Yes, but don't worry, because I'll fix it. Go to the hospital and get some x-rays and phone me when we are certain that everything is as I told you. And 4 days later, this lady, she phoned and she was completely out of it. Oh, I've got a cancer, I'm going to die. Take it easy, he said. And he fixed it. Within a week or something, it was gone. And that was how it worked. And for all the time, I was working with him very closely for 4 years. And all that time, I was just waiting for him to give me the recipe, of course. But it never came. There was no recipe. And after 5 years, I had been together with him for a few months at that time. And I went into his office, and there was a bag on his table, and he said, this bag is for you, this is your doctor's bag. Now you have to go home and start practicing. And I thought, oh, the recipe inside the bag, of course. And I couldn't get the bag fast enough into my room, and when I opened it, of course it was empty. And I thought, oh. And I went back and I thought, didn't you forget? And he looked at me, what, are you not satisfied with the bag? I think it's a very, very nice bag, don't you? Yes, but, yes. Okay. So I just went home, and of course years later I understood exactly that everybody has to find their own way. There is no recipe for anything. You have your own recipe. And I think if you should really try to what do you call it, to concentrate everything into a few sentences, it is that we are really just mirroring other dimensions all the time. All the books we are writing, everything we do, all the relationships we go into are really just mirroring other planes of consciousness, mansions. So there's so many other constellations out there and in here that we exist on, and it all goes on at the same moment. So we are mirrors, and we are, I mean, diamonds may be in the rough, but we are going, everything we experience here are going to make us even more connective and more shining and more communicating, not only with each other but also with all the other planes. And I think that's why we are here, and I think that's why you are here and I am here, that we are part of the big quickening. If you have heard about the quickening, everything is speeded up and have been for years now, and we are all part of it. So it's just a question about consciousness and being conscious, and trying just to follow and remember maybe the most important thing, that everything that we send out will return to us in some place or the other. It'll all get back to us. So everything we give out, we'll get. Yes, I don't think I'll tire you more with that, but as you probably can imagine, I could talk for hours about the seer and my other experiences. The second book about the Magdalene and the Grail you should also know that I started writing these books long before Dan Brown and all this happened. I started working with the Magdalene thing in the 80s, and that was only due to because I also there started to work with the Aramaic language, the language of Jesus, and that has been the biggest, together meeting the seer, of course, but that has really been a revelation for me, and represents a key to a lot of the things in the New Testament that in many ways make no sense at all if you are without that key. But hopefully more about that much later. Thank you. Everybody is more or less out of sync, or what you call it. So, yeah. What does one do? I think it's partly that something is happening. I think also it has something to do with it's all karmatic, and I think that we a lot of things are going on without us knowing it. Example, if you lie 3 years in a bed and you just have one thing in your head to get out of it. But I've been thinking, when you're looking to the New Testament, you maybe you remember in Luke, Yeshua is saying something like, those who try to save themselves will lose themselves, you know. If you really go into it, it has something to do with this. The minute I stopped arguing with God and just begged, oh please, and I will be so good, and isn't it a pity, and I'm pitying myself. I think it was all part of a process that was more or less made out for me without me knowing it. So if I have known about it, maybe just 3 years like this, but we never know. And maybe we get help from somewhere else suddenly. But I don't think there's any rules really for it, because it depends on your background, what you're coming in with. But one thing I know now is that everybody, without doubt, has a special agenda here on this earth. I mean, a lot of people, even spiritual people, are searching, what are we doing here, and how long should we look for this and that. I experienced a very, very special communication in a secret cave in Montségur, with spirit or whatever. And my question was, how long are we going to look for God? And the answer was, if you will just come out of hiding, then maybe God could find you. And I understood that with the word hiding was meant all our fears, our prejudices, and you know, whatever issues we rude issues and stuff. So we really have, I think it's a cleansing when you get being sick or get into some problems. And that's a big gift really, that it is part of the big cleansing. And not only a personal cleansing, also a collective cleansing. I think the genius part is that every time a single person are being conscious about their root problems, then it's so genius that every other people who have the same issue that as you have you will help them by being conscious about your root problem. Exactly like when the monkeys in the Amazonas, they open a nut in a new way, and shortly after they do the same in India. They are not phoning each other, you know, that we have a new thing going here. It's something going on the collective part. And I think that's also a thing we should never forget, that we are so connected without knowing it. So everything we do will make its mark somewhere. And of course we cannot go through life without harming others, though even if we don't want to harm them. I think it's part of this genius plan that that's the way we help each other in that way. So I'm positive that if you can try to make it a positive process by thinking positively, you will be It won't take that long.
I think it's helped to let go of this idea of a kind of a cure or
Yes.
a please God.
I think the cure is you being ill.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the cure.
Yeah, but it was kind of like, that felt quite desperate.
Of course, nobody loves
if I pray hard enough, or
Yeah.
if this try this new therapy enough, or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, coming back to that point of surrender just feels like it kind of opens to a possibility of whatever.
Yeah.
Not particularly a cure, you know, but just a kind of feeling of whatever I'm supposed to be here.
You know what? I think the expression to give it up, to give up, to give it up, that says it all, because it's all in there, you know, to give it up. In my life, it is like that. Every time I try to interfere with my things, everything goes wrong. So I just go with the first impulse, or the first energy impulse, because then I'm safe. As soon as this one is interfering, forget about it. Yeah. So I think that's what grace really is, to surrender and to give it up. Yes. Thank you. I know it's just the way it is. This is natural. That is life on earth. But everybody is trying to become more aligned, and everybody who's working, or everybody here who's interested in these things and are working with spirituality, are really trying to be in alignment with. So it takes not only the higher self, but also the shadow too. The thing we would never forget that. So now it's just beautiful, you know. It's something.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, you can say.
But I did read the blurb, and I was kind of looking through. I didn't even know there was a talk on, so it's a bit of serendipity that I'm actually sort of with you, and you're here. And I was wondering, I read just on the cover that you mentioned about, and you mentioned just then the shadow,
Yes.
and that you've confronted the shadow. Could you elucidate a bit about that, or is that giving the book away?
I don't know. Being a scorpion, maybe that's part of a scorpion's path, really, to go down to the hell plane, or whatever you call it, deep down, and try to look behind everything. And you know, as a Scorpio, you are never satisfied with just a blunt answer. You really want to go behind that. So that's also part of it, I think. But I had some quite distinctive experiences in that area, yes.
And quite confronting.
Yes, really. Or not only at a personal level, also on a collective level.
Okay.
So, but it will take too much time to go into it. But it is interesting, because without any comparison at all. But if we read again in the New Testament, and I'm sorry I have to, because you know, when Jesus went into hell and released the souls there, or he went into the desert for 40 days to confront himself with the wild animals. Of course, that was a shadow thing. And if you read the New Testament through the Aramaic language, it says that he put himself in an unprotected state, and that's something that nobody really wants to do.
Yes, sure.
Today, everybody is protecting themselves. They don't want to, you know. Everybody is talking about how can we protect ourselves when we work with the force and the power and stuff. But he set himself in an unprotected state. So that is something that is a real challenge, you know, to go out there and challenge yourself to see what is beneath and behind everything. So that's a shadow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about the Magdalene Soul Collective in terms of, say, the role of the High Priestess, the Earth Mother Goddess, the returning of that energy to the Earth.
You remember the Mother Mary archetype?
Yeah.
Until 415 or 20, something around there.
Yeah.
There was no goddess in the Christian world. and Mother Mary didn't play any part at all. It was only because that people wanted their goddess back, that the church fathers, they tried to figure out what to do, and somebody came up with Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus, and she had been up there representing the dove. So the other part was really Mary Magdalene. She represented everything from here and down there, but the church didn't want to have anything to do with that. So this was sin and guilt and shame and everything. So it's not strange that the moon priestess come in now, because for 2,000 or 1,800 years we have been out without connection to this. Now what that really means is that we are living in a complete pornographic world, where nobody really knows anything about what the sexual power is all about. And that was what the moon priestesses at that time knew all about. And to my knowledge, there's no doubt that Mary Magdalene, a lot of people are not aware that she was the one who anointed Jesus. But everybody who knows about the Jewish customs know that the one who is going to anoint another has to be equal to that other. So if Jesus was equal with her, he was a whore like her, or she was an initiated person like he was, and he was Jeshua the Nazarene, which means Jesus the initiated. So of course she also was, she had an education, and she probably had her education in Alexandria, at the therapists outside, with Lake Marisotti. It's all, you can read about it in Philo if you want to. So they were equal, and there's such a fantastic saying in an old Aramaic gospel, and I don't know if I can remember it here now, but it said something like, it is in my book also, in the o-manuscript, that Jesus says something like, I and my bride are one, just as Mary Magdalene, whom I have chosen for myself as an example, is one with me. He really says there that the bride is his own feminine side, and he has found that reflected in an earthly woman, in Mary Magdalene, and therefore chosen her as a teacher for him, because they are one. It's a very, very beautiful little piece. And of course he has been a teacher for her also. But the story and the bottom line of that is that they were working in equality. And you can also read a lot about the tantric messages in the New Testament, the bridal chamber that Jesus is talking about, that and the whole feminine principle and archetype is only whole when you have the Mother Mary and the Magdalene. So they must become one, and you can see the picture of those two together in one in my book also. But there's so much more I could tell you about it, and it would take days, because it's so interesting. And when all this happened with the Magdalene, a lot of people were too much into that Jesus and Magdalene were married, they had children, and the bloodline and all stuff. Of course it's interesting, but it's not that interesting. There's so much more to it, and then you have to go much deeper, because it's all there. And the important thing for me is that it's all in the New Testament. You don't even have to go to all the Gnostic things or the secret things. I thought that in the beginning, until I stumbled over that key, the Aramaic language. So that makes a big difference, for instance.